How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Welcome to the Dr. Joe Show. That was lovely. Really, as always, it's wonderful resonance. And do you practice during the week at all, Mark? Or is this just spontaneous?
Nice, Dr. Joe. That's so nice. No, I don't. Never practiced. Not once. Never, ever. Yeah, not once. Not even one lesson.
I think that's great because, you know, it's spontaneous, it resonates, and it comes out different each time, which is great. I'm so glad that you hit the recording button, though, really. Just wanted to put that in there, you know? So folks,
I just realized the microphone plugged in.
Yeah, we're doing fine. And Larry, you in the studio there? You doing okay, Larry? Hope everything's good. Larry's there. I know he is. So, Mark, at some point, it would be really interesting. Maybe next week, if it's just you and I, talk about what we did last night.
Last night. Yeah.
That was really interesting.
Have you been able to reflect upon our little venture into the city?
I have. We saw how would you say it? It's not a performance, a presentation by
a lecture.
Dr. Jordan Peters, a lecture, which was quite fascinating. We will definitely come back to that. There was a lot of themes in it. There are a lot of sort of religious themes, but identity themes, other themes. And in many ways, that identity theme really does sort of segue right into what we're talking about tonight as well. So with that in mind, Mark, could you introduce our guest for tonight?
That would be amazing, Dr. Joe. Since she fell in love with writing in high school, Anne Henrich has been a journalist, a columnist, blogger, and nonprofit communications professional. Her first article appeared in Rockford magazine in 1987. She's interviewed and written features on Beverly Sills, Judy Collins, Gene Siskel, and Debbie Reynolds. Anne's writing has been featured in the New York Times bestseller The Right Words at the Right Time, Volume 2, Your Turn, and Chicken Soup for the Souls, The Cancer Book, 101 Stories of Courage, Support, and Love. Anne's debut novel, God Bless the Child, is the first in a 3-book series, The Women of Paradise County, to be published by Speaking Volumes. She and her husband are parents to 3 adult children, and is passionate about her family, her mental health, advocacy, and the power of storytelling. Welcome to the show, Anne.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Anne. And we're delighted to have you here. So this first book is certainly not your first episode of writing. So you've been writing for a while now.
Yes. Yeah. I really got turned on to writing when I was in high school.
Wow. And I love writing as well. What is it about it that turns you on to writing?
You know, I was talking with a writer friend of mine the other day, and she said she really nailed it perfectly. And this is kind of how I just explain it. I feel like I'm getting away with something when I'm writing.
Huh.
It's so much fun that it feels sometimes a little bit self-indulgent, for sure, which is why I've had to, do it in fits and starts. But I just love being able to just create things and just see where it goes. Yeah. It's fun for me. Mm-hmm.
And when you say you feel you're getting away with something, what do you feel you're getting away with?
I don't know. It's just so much fun. I guess that might be the mother of 3 coming out in me a little bit. So when they were all, of course they're grown now, but when I was raising children and taking care of a family in a more intense way, it always felt a little bit self-indulgent, like I shouldn't be doing it. You know what I mean? And I've certainly come around with that. I've realized it's just an essential part of who I am and what makes me happy. Yeah.
I can resonate with that because I've also fell in love with writing in high school. And I was talking with Mark about this the other night about the process, because I haven't written much in a while, but we worked on some other things. But I don't know what your process is, but for me, I may go for weeks and months without writing anything and then sit down and it like just flows out almost unedited. What's your process?
That happens to me too. Actually, this first book, I don't do it as much as I used to, but I actually used to start, and this book started that way, in a cafe booth with a stack of yellow legal pads and a sharp pencil. And I wrote most of it out like that. And then what I would do is when I was typing it in so other people could read it, then I was typing it in. And that's kind of how that worked. I don't do that anymore. But I too, Dr. Joe, I also, sometimes it'll just hit me and it doesn't matter what time it is or whatever. I'll get up and I can go for hours and hours and hours and it just kind of happens like that. Not that it isn't work, but yeah.
Yeah.
I love it when that happens.
Yeah. And before the show, you said that you actually wrote this or started writing it a while ago. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I did. Yeah. This is just, I really like the way this is unfolded. One of the things I say is that the universe finally said yes to this project, actually. So when I started writing God Bless the Child, it was right after an essay. I'd written an essay for the Marlo Thomas book, which was The Right Words at the Right Time, and submitted it and didn't think anything about it. And that was an essay about learning that my grandmother had been a lingerie model in the 30s.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was just such a neat thing to write about. And I just loved it. And then all of a sudden I got this call, right? And they had chosen it to be in the collection. And so that was great. And through that, I met my editor, longtime friend, David Tabatsky, and we started working together. And my kids were very, very little when that happened. And he said, you really should be writing. You need to be doing this, And of course, I was doing communications kinds of writing, but not fiction and not this kind of writing. I said, I just got something started, and he agreed to edit it. And it was this book. The whole reason that I even had time to do it was our youngest daughter, Charlotte, was 3 years old, and she was ready to go to preschool. But you needed to take a bus about 8 miles over to the next town to do this where we were living. And I thought she was too little to be on the bus by herself. And she did not like that one bit. But her backpack was bigger than she was. And I just wasn't ready. So I would drive her and wait it was 3 days a week. And I would wait for her in this little cafe and drink Diet Coke and with my yellow legal pads. And that's how it actually got scratched out. But then life got in the way, just like for everybody else. I'd written the complete book with David's help. Everybody needs an editor, and he was really great. We work really well together. We'd even started pitching it. I had pitched it to several places. I have a stack of rejections somewhere, and even got the coveted request for the full manuscript one time. And so that was so great. We sent it off. And then the agent really wanted me to make some changes that I felt I just wasn't ready to do that. In fact, she really wanted me to get rid of one of the major characters in the book. And which I felt like that would be almost like pulling the spine out of a person. If you don't, well, you've read the book. So if you don't have Mary Klein, you don't have a story.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I just said no, and life got in the way. We ended up moving. We've had parents pass away. We've had just, our share of things that just happen, right, in family life. And it never felt really good to get back at it. And then, I don't know, recently, I'm closer to 60 than I am 50 now. And I decided, I had started scratching out some other stories, short pieces, and I'd reached back out to David and I said, hey, remember me? Would you be willing to look at some of these pieces? And he said, oh, of course, but what about God bless the child? We put a ton of work into that. You should pull that back out. And to be honest with you, I hadn't looked at it closely for about 10 years.
Mm.
And I don't know why. I don't know. I just hadn't. And he said, yes, I will look at your stuff, your new stuff, but let's pull that out again. Let's look at it. And so I poured myself a big glass of wine and read it again. I hadn't pulled it out for that long. And I realized he was right. It did still have legs.
Yeah.
But we made some changes to it in the meantime. Yeah. So but that was 18 years had passed. So that's what's interesting. I just feel like the time was right for me to get back in there.
Yeah. And timing is everything. Timing is everything. And which leads me to actually talking about the timing that we need right now to take a break for our sponsors, because they will never reject us. I also know about manuscript rejection. But with that in mind, Larry, let's take a break, hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show and Anne Henrich.
Hey, folks, thank you for listening to the Dr. Joe Show. We've been investigating whether or not we want to bring sponsors into our podcast. What are your thoughts? Do you know somebody who might be a good partner with the Dr. Joe Show, who may want to align their product or service with the Dr. Joe Show? Think about it. And we are back. Thank you, Larry, for bringing us right back into the Dr. Joe Show right here at WATD Live with author Anne Henrich, talking about her new book.
Yeah. And we are talking about the new book, God Bless the Child. So we were talking that you actually wrote this about 18 years ago. What was going on then that prompted this book? And I've read it, and it's still as timely today as it was almost 2 decades ago.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think I just started, to be perfectly, I didn't start with an outline at all. I just imagined this character, Mary Klein. She's the one that I insisted stay in the book. And it just kind of started from there. And I wrote a couple of different chapters, and it just felt like, I'm always watching people. I love to watch people and imagine where they've been, where they're coming. I think it's very interesting to see what people are think they need to bring with them. So for instance, if you're in an airport or whatever, there are people who think they need a neck rest or whatever. So I'm always fascinated by just what people bring with them. And that's kind of how that started. It's interesting that you say that, because when I did dive back in while I was holding my big glass of wine to feel like this still had legs, we did make a few changes for sure. There were some things that I felt needed to be fleshed out. To be perfectly honest, a lot can change in 18 years. I think I'm actually a stronger writer now than I was back then. So I could go at it with a red pencil and look at it objectively. And David, my editor, helped me with that too. One of the things that I think I've gotten better about, that we were able to add a lot more dialogue the second time, to insert some of that. So I felt like that was good. The one thing that has changed when I wrote this, from when I wrote this, is just, where we are in this country with reproductive rights, right? Having reproductive choice. When I wrote that, it wasn't really an issue. That was, we had those choices.
Right.
And now things are very shaky. And so in some ways, I do think, because some of the content in this book does discuss some of that, I think it actually makes it a little bit more evergreen, but in a different way, right? Because the world has changed.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Was there, we're not going to give this story away, folks, but when you were writing about this, there was a very powerful moment in the book, which I will mention after, reproductive right person has their pregnancy terminated, a choice in that chapter. And folks, let me just also describe the way the chapters are set up. So you get the chapter number, but then there's a name underneath it in italics. And that is the perspective. So that's the person who's telling the story of that particular chapter, which I think was great. So we have these different characters woven throughout the whole book, and it gives the reader an opportunity to shift the perspective from one character to another, which I think is a very interesting technique and device. We're going to come back to that, but I wanted to talk about, could you talk a little bit about the choice you made with this particular moment in the book, with the nurse coming back in the room?
Right. And so it's pretty visceral.
Yeah,
for sure. And actually, when I've read it, of course, I've read it many times since then, and it still shocks me a little bit. And I think that is important, not to offend people. One of the things that I can come to it now with different, older, more mature sensibilities is that different things can exist in the same space. So something that makes us uncomfortable can exist in the same space as something that makes us comfortable, right? And so you shift really quickly. A lot of times I chose that because there were some rough moments between these two characters, right? And after it happens, this very visceral description of what takes place, they go home and comfort one another. And I think that is really essential. I guess that's always happened, right? But all of a sudden I see it with different eyes, so something that makes us uncomfortable can live up nice and tight right up against something that's good or bad. Those two coexist, and they can coexist almost instantly, right? And I think that's why I made that choice.
Yeah, and the progression as we watch the relationship grow between these two women. I mean, really, there's some moments where you get really choked up, especially, which shows a lot about writing technique and style. But the reproductive right part, I mean, it's on everyone's mind right now. It's in the news. It's remarkable after so many decades that, it's back. I'm talking about this. Did you, 18 years ago, this was not an issue.
Mm-mm.
Is there a timeliness to God Bless the Child now? Is this part of the timeliness to publish this?
I think absolutely, but it not of my own creation. I think that's just kind of the funny way that things happen, right? I was ready to take it back on. I had made a really intentional choice to start creating some space for myself to just do things that are fun, to kind of embrace some joy again, right? And just get in there and do what I want to do. And it just so happened that the world has changed. The world that we're in has changed, right? And what I think is interesting about the book, I'm sure I know people who will read it and be very uncomfortable with that piece of it, just the description of it, all of it. But one of the things that I do like about the book is that it shows various other alternatives that have become part of that conversation around parenting. So for instance, you'll hear people say, oh, well, why don't you just put them up for adoption? Well, in this book, we show examples of that's not always the happy ending either. There are people in this story who are not equipped to be parents. Even one of the primary characters in this book had differences in her life. She has a different answer, or, at one point she definitely feels like she needs to have an abortion, and that's the choice that is made. Later on, she desperately wants to have a child and then discovers, that being a mother doesn't come so easily. She also loses a child to miscarriage. And I think that's one of the things that I wrote a piece that's going to be in Ms. Magazine about that. And, if I'm being really honest and authentic, if I even just look back at my own life, depending on circumstances, different nuances of life, I probably would have made a different decision, any number of different decisions at different points, right?
And I think
we need to be considering that.
yeah, and I think the different options that occur in life are reflected in the story. Mark, do you have some thoughts about this? It's a tough world right now with reproductive choice. There's all sorts of components to it.
It's a conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people have very strong opinions about this conversation. We've had guests on talking about this in the past.
We have indeed.
And as long as we listen to everybody, right?
And I think, yes, that is the most important part is to be able to listen and not without judgment, because as soon as you judge someone, you shut down the conversation.
Right? Absolutely.
Right. And then don't be surprised if they judge you back. Right. So I think in the book, showing the different perspectives is important, and the different timings of it and the different wishes that we all may have when it comes to having children, being a parent. And some people are great at it and some people can't. And that's, right. Again, that's their I am, right? We're not judging that. That's what the I am is all about. Is right. That's your current max potential. What has happened in the 4 domains that's who you are right now. If you don't like it, you can change it. But I'm not going to judge people on it at all. I think it just shuts down the conversation.
Right. I think it does. I think it does too. And what I always want to unpack, if somebody, whether it's this issue or something on the political spectrum or whatever, I think it's far more interesting, and we need to start opening up paths to be able to have conversations. I want to know, well, what was it? How did you get to that thought? What is your thought process? How did you get there? Because, a lot of us don't even think about that. We think we have an opinion about something and we don't even know what has shaped that opinion or that thought. Or maybe we don't all have the same information or the same level of circumstances. That's one of the things that I write in this other article. It's that, I've been pretty fortunate. I've been broke, but I've never been poor. Mm-hmm. I've always had a lot of options, but to make the assumption that everybody has the same equal level of options and opportunity, the world is a pretty capricious place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
yeah. And not everybody does have the same opportunity, and not everybody has the same information, but we are very fortunate is that we have sponsors who do have the opportunity to share their information. So with that in mind, we'll take a commercial break. We'll hear from our sponsors and their information. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show.
Hey, folks, welcome back. So any thoughts? Do you listen to other podcasts? Do you see how they do the sponsors? Is there a way that they're utilizing sponsors that you enjoy or you don't enjoy? I listen to SmartLess, and I really enjoy how the co-hosts share the voiceover for the product or service. It's really funny for the most part, but it's unique. It's them really endorsing. Does that work? What do you think? And we're back right here live on WATD with the Dr. Joe Show with author Anne Henrich talking about her new book, God Bless the Child.
And before we go on, your delay in bringing us back in reminded me of Hey Jude and how many times they go, na, 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 na. Just for people who know, Mark and I hosted the karaoke. Right. We hosted karaoke at Grad Night Live. It was absolutely delightful. And one kid picked Hey Jude, and we had no idea how many repeats that na, 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 na had. It goes on for like 10 minutes. It was remarkable. Anyway, nonetheless, I digress.
And it was 3:30 in the morning.
And it was 3:30. Yeah, we were there from 10 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were packed. Kids were coming in.
That was
to sing karaoke. It was really fun. Really fun. Anyway, nonetheless. So off air, we were talking about God Bless the Child, and there are really there are three main women, right? There's Elizabeth, there's Mary Klein, and then there's Louise. And they're all mothers in their own way. Certainly, and then there's Pearl as well. Mm-hmm. So we were talking a little off air about how to define motherhood and how this book begins to illuminate the different definitions, if you will, of it. So, Anne, do you want to take the lead on that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I actually have a lovely relationship with my mom. So there's that. But the relationship between, really, if you think about it, all of the characters are hungry for some kind of what I would call high quality or authentic mothering, right? They all need that. And often because they don't have it necessarily, then they don't really have a roadmap, right, of how to do it. So a lot of them mother in the way that they think they should be mothering, and that somehow there's an authentic, so this won't give anything away, but Mary Klein is deeply flawed and insecure, right? But she mothers Elizabeth by smothering her, really,
right,
with all the accoutrements of what it must look like externally to be a great mother. And it's almost overkill, right? And so she meets resistance with that, right? Because even as a child, Elizabeth recognizes quite quickly that there's something off. There's something off kilter there. The other exploration is, and it's interesting, the character Pearl, if you'll notice, she doesn't get a chapter. She has no voice.
I've noticed that, absolutely.
What we know about her is that, she's disabled. She also is without a mother, extremely vulnerable. Yeah. And it's really interesting kind of toward the end of the book, because they start to think about her when she's gone, did she realize that she's actually the biological mother of it? Did she recognize what her role was? Or was she too childlike herself to not understand what was really going on? Right. And I think, again, it just kind of circles back to that need we have to be nurtured and loved. And sometimes it's our biological, the person who gave birth to us, who can do that. Sometimes it isn't, right? That's the whole capricious nature. We do, as children, when we come into the world, we don't get to pick who we land with, right? And I actually didn't even start thinking about that till the second round of edits. I was like, wow, nobody here really picks this situation when you're being parented, right?
Nope, you don't pick your parents, but I do think you have a choice of what kind of parent you want to be.
Correct.
What kind of parent you become. And how you then address your children. One of my phrases is for parents is, as a child psychiatrist, I work a lot with parents, and I say to them, it is much more rewarding to be amazed at who your child is than disappointed in who they are not.
Wow.
Because when your children are amazing, and when you see them that way, it's inspirational to your child as well. They feel valued. And so in the book, we have these mother-child relationships. We have, Mary Klein, who basically becomes a mother, even though it's not her biological child. Mm-hmm. And we have Elizabeth, who does become a mother with a biological child. Mm-hmm. We have Louise, who is mother of Mary, and the protection there, and how sometimes we want to protect our children and stuff happens anyway.
Right.
So without giving stuff away, can you talk about how did that theme come into Anne's story 18 years ago?
Oh, gosh. I don't even know, although I can say there was a germination point. There's one thing that I could probably point it to. We had 3 children, so I think I told you about that with the 3-year-olds and all of that. But in between that, I did lose a child. We lost a child to late miscarriage, right? And it really did impact us pretty deeply. I think I was probably still working a lot of that out in my mind, and just trying to figure out what that meant, what that lost personhood meant for us, for our family, all of those kinds of things that go through. And I can remember when it happened, we went to the doctor, and that is one of the scenes that's in here. Elizabeth goes and they discover there's not a heartbeat. Yeah. That actually did happen to me. And at the time, I'm much more assertive now. Back then, I didn't question, but they said, well, there's no heartbeat, so go home and we'll wait for things to naturally just take their course. Your body will know, and then come back and we'll just take it from there. So I went home for 2 weeks, and I could feel the baby move at different times. And then I think, maybe they were wrong, right? And I'd call and demand to go back in to get another, whatever. And it was really a rough couple of weeks. Really, those are just involuntary movements that can happen or whatever. But it really messed with me, actually, psychologically for a while.
I bet. I mean, I so appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah. And then, at that time, we go in or whatever, and they do what is called a D&C. Finally, I don't know why they couldn't have just done that right away. I don't know. Anyway, and I can remember looking at the paperwork, and at the time, for me, the word abortion meant I just didn't have enough information. It said abortion on our, the take-home papers that you get when you're being discharged. And I was so offended by that, because I didn't think that's what had happened to me. What had happened to me, I didn't equate those two things. But medically, that's what it is. And that's what they called it right up there on the paperwork. And I can remember just being so offended. Well, that's not an abortion. An abortion is when you choose to do that. Well, I didn't choose, and I think probably in my mind, I was working a lot of those things out. And that's probably where some of those scenes that are in it came from, for sure. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate you sharing that. It's powerful. I cannot imagine what it is like to be walking around knowing that what is meant to be alive in you is not. I mean,
right?
Unfathomable.
Yeah. And you hear all these stories now. They're in the news constantly about someone who is medically compromised, right? Who, but until their life is literally, in danger, they can't get medical care in some of these states. So I imagine there's quite a bit of that kind of thing happening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's sad. It is sad.
It is. There are so many areas where we have a right to choose certain things, and then somebody says, no, you don't. And it's, reproductive rights is one thing, abortion is, but there are so many other areas in there where, you think you've got right to go. I mean, not to make it silly, but your 3-year-old saying, no, you can't go on the bus by yourself.
Right,
but
exactly.
Don't I get to choose to go on the bus? No, you don't.
Yeah, not till mama's ready. Yeah,
Right. Not mama's ready.
Right.
There are some things that we cannot choose, and other things that we can. And I'm very honored that one of the things we can choose is when we take a commercial break. And so what we will do is choose that to hear from our sponsors and what they have to offer us. And we'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show. And God bless the child.
Hey, welcome back. And again, we're super grateful for you listening to the Dr. Joe Show. If you have anyone that you think might be a good sponsor, shoot us an email at drjoepodcast@gmail.com. DRJOE podcast@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts about the show, too. We're wondering, are we talking to the trees, or are people really gaining value in this? Please let us know. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of the show. And we're back with the Dr. Joe Show with author Anne Henrich with her new book, God Bless the Child.
Yeah. Book 1 in a trilogy, The Women of Paradise County. So I'm just curious, and we haven't even touched it all. So a trilogy.
Yes.
Tell us, can you give us like a teaser about the next couple of books, and are they written or
yes
process? That'd be great.
Yeah, they are named. They are all, not completely written, but a good chunk of both of this. Again, the same style, right? With the perspectives of new characters. So what really threads all three books that makes them a series is that they all happen in this same small Midwestern town. There might be a couple of characters that get transplanted, and we dive a little bit deeper into some of the rabbit hole kind of stuff, but that's really what connects all three of them. And the second book, I'm working feverishly. Actually, I was teasing my family the other day. I said, I think if I'm going to get book 2 done, I'm going to need to go into the witness protection program or something. So you'll leave me alone. Just so I can write. Yeah, it's got a good chunk, and I'm feeling really good about it. That one is called Violet is Blue. It also has some dark themes. I don't know why I keep going toward the fire there, but I do. I just think that it's interesting. And the third book is called House of Teeth. And that also is almost halfway through, right? And then I just need to get serious about it. Book 2 will release in the spring of 25. Okay. So I've got a bit of time.
And how do people find you, and how do they find the book?
Right. So you can go to my website, which is www.anneshawheinrich.com.
Okay.
And that's how you can find all the information and other writing and other stuff like that.
And there are links to the book, and you can get it through your website, probably through Amazon and other places.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Also a lot of independent, there's a place that you can click that you can check for supporting independent bookstores too. So,
well, folks, it is a great read. It really is. It moves. It, and no pun intended, but there's a thread through it as well, because there is this theme of sewing and things like that. So there's some great themes to it. Let me go to the two questions, so we have time to really explore them. As you know, the I am approach is saying that we're always at a current maximum potential. We're doing the best we can at every moment in time, but responding and influenced by the 4 domains: your home domain, the social domain, which is everything else. And certainly in the book, we see how the home domain and the social domain has an influence on each of the characters. Those 2 domains are outside. Then the 2 internal domains, the biological domain of your brain and body. Are you hungry, tired? Do you have some developmental challenges, or are you pregnant or not? And then the I see domain. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? Human beings are very interested in what other people think or feel, call that empathy. But what we really want to know is, what are you thinking about me? Do you see me as valuable? Because the 4 domains interact, a small change in any of the domains can have a big effect. Don't need to change everything. So Anne, given what we're talking about tonight, what small change can you recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I have given this some thought, and I think I'm still really enjoying this change that I've made for myself, because I've been a caregiver and working full time, and when you're a mom, you're kind of the hub, actually, of a lot of activity and things that happen. But the change that I've made is been very intentional about creating space for joy. Which it's so easy to let go of that when you feel overwhelmed by all of the other domains and frankly, demands that happen. And so one of the things that brings me great joy, aside from my family, of course, and lovely friends, is writing. That makes me happy. That's a big piece of who I am. And by doing that, I'm a better mother, friend, daughter, better human, right? When I've just allowed some of that joy to come back and just been intentional about it. Now, to do that, that means some other things aren't getting done. I'm not pulling weeds. I'm not making as much dinner as I used. I'm not doing as much cooking, right? I have somebody that comes and helps me clean, just things like that, because you can't do it all at once, right? But I as I inch closer towards 60, I refuse to not allow joy to be a piece of the world that I'm gonna be here for.
Space for joy. Mark, what do you think about space for joy? Are you able to do that for yourself at all? I know how busy you are.
Joy is very important, and time blocking is essential. And I time block for creation, right? So that creative time, and that brings me joy. And then it's the family time. I think joy is definitely underrated, and I think people definitely need to prioritize joy. I love that you're saying that, and it's that enlightenment time as you inch towards 60, as you say. It's.
I don't feel 60 though, honestly. Wow. I still can't believe I'm 57. That just, it doesn't feel like it to me. I still feel
60 is the new 40 anyhow.
That's right. I'm here for it.
I'm so glad. No, I mean, I got Medicare A for my birthday, so I'm
nice.
65. I do not feel that way. Joy, I mean, another word is happiness. Joy and happiness. And this is oxytocin, not OxyContin. This is oxytocin.
Right.
This is that neurohormone of trust and happiness and joy, which is different than pleasure. Pleasure is fleeting, but joy and happiness, something that can be eternal if we let it. It's a great small change. Space for joy. So the other truth of the I am, everyone's got one. Everyone is interested through their IC domain, what you think or feel about them, which has an effect on their biological domain, because it feels different when you feel respected or disrespected. And you are part of someone's home or social domain. So what this means is the second truth: you control no one, you influence everyone. You get to choose the kind of influence you want to be. Anne Henrich, author, journalist, mother, human being. What kind of influence do you want to be?
I've thought about this one too. And, I really want to be someone who is approachable and that is going to show people kindness. Honestly, just be kind. We do not have to agree, especially in this polarized world that we're in, and we hide behind our social media and we hide behind our cars with road rage. There's so much negativity that gets kind of pushed out into the world. And I think we need to reclaim that and just recognize we don't have to agree on everything, but we're all human. Let's find what we do agree on and get back to just seeing in a way that's respectful. So that's what I want to put out there. I don't want to put any more negativity. The world has enough of that, right?
Yeah. And I could not agree more. Kindness, it's not a difficult thing to do, folks. And as you guys have heard me say many times, we all want the same thing. We just want to feel valued by somebody else. Think about every person you've ever met. Everyone wants the same thing. We are one group. It's called humanity. One group. That common thread is what binds us. So how can you do that, Anne? What is the secret? How does your own space for joy translate into kindness for others?
Mm-hmm. I think some of this does just come with wisdom. Honestly, I do feel like the timing has been right. I might not have been as equipped to do that 18 years ago when I first wrote the book. But, life has knocked us around a little bit. We've had some hard things. And it's made us very, very appreciative of things when they're good and recognizing when things aren't so good that won't last either. Right. Probably the biggest blow that we've had for our family is supporting our son and being in this struggle with him with a serious mental illness, right? We've learned so much about it. We've been educators, and that has created in both of us. When I say us, I mean really everyone in our family. a level of empathy and protectiveness that we probably didn't know we had in us, right? And so when you're living with someone who faces a lot of stigma and lack of understanding and fear, because a lot of people don't understand what schizophrenia really is and all, so that has opened up pockets of empathy in me that I probably didn't realize I had, right? So anytime I see anyone suffering, I look at them as if they could be my child. Or I think of that person, oh, they've got a mother, right?
Kindness, folks, something we can all do. We can all do for each other. Anne Henrich, thanks so much. Folks, get the book, God Bless the Child.
Thank you.
Anne Henrich. Henrich. Folks, thanks so much. Larry, we'll see you. Anne, Mark, see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, folks.
Brush with madness, is it sadness or just a show? Then go, go.